We now want to hear from Sir Michael Barber.
Well, first of all, thank you, Governor Nixon and Governor Haslam, for the invitation to be with you. It's a real honour and a privilege, particularly to follow Andreas and the Secretary at this important meeting. I want to begin by congratulating you, Ashley, on the timing of your... On the timing of your election. So it may feel like a challenging economic time, but actually in education, this is one of those rare moments. I use a quote from a British historian of 100 years ago. This is one of those rare moments when you have a huge opportunity to transform education in this country. There's a great bipartisan agenda across the country that the Secretary has just outlined. There are great proof points in the states represented here across the country, and there's a growing knowledge base that Andreas has referred to, and I want to go into a bit more deeply from countries around the world of what it takes to transform education systems. The first thing I want to say about transforming education system is it matters a lot. Andreas mentioned a $72 trillion cost of falling behind the leaders. What this slide shows is the impact of the achievement gap on America's schools, and the report is in front of you on the table. Basically, the achievement gap is the equivalent of a permanent national recession. If America closed the gap on other countries and then closed the gap between its different minorities, it would be like pulling out of a permanent national recession. The second thing to say is the good news. What Andreas shows and what this slide shows is systems at every level, whatever their background performance, can improve significantly within as few as 6 years. So here we've got Chile, Latvia, Saxony, one of the states in Germany, and Hong Kong, all of them improving by a significant amount of a school year equivalent within a relatively short period of time. So this is perfectly doable. The other piece of good news is that as you improve performance, in fact, to match the best performance, you have to narrow the achievement gap. This is Singapore, often written off as a small state with only 4 million people and all of them Chinese. Actually, it's got significant ethnic minorities. And what you see here is that over a 20 to 30 year period, really impressive gap narrowing has happened there, which is one of the reasons why it leads the world. And then there's even more good news, which is from the studies we've been able to do using Andreas's data. We can show what it takes to achieve top performance. And here are the 6 things that come through again and again in that research. First of all, you have to set challenging standards. And the common standards that are being set by 40-odd states around this country are absolutely vital to facing the next decade here. Then you have to apprentice and develop teachers effectively, make sure you're recruiting the right people, make sure they don't just have a good teacher training at the beginning, but they continue to learn through their careers. You have to make entry into teaching highly selective so that you're getting people who are really good and have real potential, both their personal characteristics and their academic qualities. You have to select from that group of people excellent school leaders and make sure that they too are developed to take on the awesome task of managing and leading a school that is seeking to achieve high standards. Where there is failure in the system, whether it's at the level of the individual child, the classroom, the school, or the local district, that failure needs to be tackled because that failure costs the students in those places. And finally, you need data-informed policy at every level in the system. If you look at the race to the top proposals that the states have brought forward in response to the department's invitation over the last couple of years, you see that many of these features are represented there. What are called the 4 assurances, the emphasis on standards, the emphasis on really good data systems, the emphasis on strengthening human capital, the emphasis on dealing with school failure. All of those are things that the global knowledge base would tell you you need to do if you're going to match the best performers in the world. One of the things about the strategy is you need to know how to improve depending on your base. The Secretary pointed out the huge range of performance among the states and indeed the districts here in the United States. You can create a universal scale of every education system in the world, which has been work that's been led from out of Stanford University and that we've been drawing on, and you can identify the different strategies required at each stage of development, whether it's poor to fair, fair to good, good to great, or great to excellent. Most of the states in the United States are either fair to good or the majority of them actually good to great, and just a small handful in the great to excellent category. There's lots of aspects of that change, but the most fundamental one is that while accountability is really important at every level and teacher capacity building is really important at every level, the balance between them changes as the systems develop. So the nearer you get to top performance, the more you have to emphasize focusing on improving the classroom performance of each teacher and all the teachers collectively. That's where the improvement comes from as you get into the good to great category. So the focus on professional development and how teachers learn to teach a better lesson tomorrow than they did yesterday is absolutely vital. If you look at some of the data in the United States, unfortunately, what you find is that teachers improve for the first 3 years, and then for the next 37 years, they plateau out in performance. That's not much of a career prospect, and it's not what you need to match the best in the world. So taking a system from good to great requires a really major reshaping of the teaching profession, really focusing on the caliber of entering teachers, and from those group, the people who are becoming principals. Really focusing on those who are already teachers, already principals, on improving their ability to do their job day to day. There's no avoiding that if you want to achieve top performance. And then, of course, when you've got good principals and good teachers, it makes sense to devolve responsibility to the school level so that those talented, well-trained, well-developed, well-motivated people drive performance and have the discretion to, for example, move their budget around to do some of the things that the Secretary was mentioning, for example, with class size would be a good example. Give them the responsibility of managing the resources in order to achieve the high standards that you're setting through the common standards. Conceptually, it's really simple. To do it in practice, systematically and rigorously over a period of time, is tough. The top systems in the world do this absolutely relentlessly. Let me give you some examples. So, for example, here from taking examples from Singapore, Finland, and Korea, government regulates the supply of teachers, so it makes sure it gets really good people. In the case of Singapore, the top third of graduates go into teaching. In the case of Finland, it's the top 10%. In the case of primary education in Korea, it's the top 5% of the graduate distribution going into those areas, and then making sure they get a good teaching experience. They have government funds teacher training to make sure that that constant process of improvement and skill is happening all the time in every school for every teacher. Government thinks about making sure that teachers work in a good professional working environment. They look, for example, at how teachers' pay compares to a group of other professions. In Singapore, for example, they constantly adjust teachers' pay in accordance with what's happening in the private sector and other parts of the public sector, such as the civil service. So this can be done, but it involves determination and persistence over time. And as the Secretary would tell you, this country needs over 1 million new teachers in the next 5 to 7 years. At one point, one way of looking at that is that's a huge threat. The other is it's a huge opportunity to transform the human capital in the system over the next 2 to 3 decades. At the moment, top graduates in the United States aren't choosing to become teachers. If you look at the top third of the graduate distribution in the United States, only 9% of them currently plan to teach. A part of that is the beneficial effect of Teach for America, but still 91% don't plan to teach. Moreover, when systems do recruit top third graduates in the United States, and some of them do, what you find is that those top third graduates, first of all, they do believe they can change the world through their jobs. So that's great. They're motivated. They see the ability to make a difference. They're not sure that their colleagues are the kinds of people they choose to work with, given the choice. And more importantly, only 3% of them think that by doing well, they will get promoted. That is a big problem. So it's not just about recruiting people, it's about their prospects after they've been recruited. So, summarizing, getting the policy agenda right is really important, and you see here a set of challenges that the US faces compared to other systems. All of these things should be on your agenda state by state. The Race to the Top process put these on the agenda in many states. Many states have chosen to put them on the agenda off their own bat. All of these issues are really important. And focusing on the quality of principles makes a huge difference too. Finally, coming to political leadership, system leadership, whether it's the state or the district, what we find in the top performing systems in the world is that the strategic leaders and the political leaders generally are staying a significant period of time. So the average in the 20-odd systems that we studied last year was 6 years in post. So good luck with your re-election. What you find is that the urban superintendents in this country average 2.8 years. And when we look at the political leaders, there's a 7-year average there as opposed to the strategic, who are the administrative heads. But in England, education secretaries, I've known the last 12, they've managed 24 years between them. Every 2 years we change. No wonder we've struggled in the last few years to keep matching the best in the world. And then finally, while getting the policy agenda right is really difficult for the reasons I've just given, that's actually only about 10% of the challenge. The real challenge, the 90%, is systematic implementation and delivery of results. And this requires being clear what you want to do, having a plan to get it done, building the routines that make sure you're driving that agenda through as all the crises that affect every government impact. And finally, that you build the relationships inside the political system and beyond the political system to get the job done. This is a picture of Annapurna. It was first climbed in 1950. I walked around it a couple of years ago. It's a spectacular place. The guy who first climbed it was a Frenchman called Maurice Herzog. And when he got down, he wrote a beautiful book about the ascent of Annapurna. And the last line of the book is, "There are other Annapurnas in the lives of people." And your Annapurna is to get from base camp, where you are now, to the summit of educational achievement in the next few years. And I look forward to seeing you on the summit. Thank you very much.